This is how to find your squat stance. So there's a lot of misinformation out there regarding squat stance and how your feet need to be straight forward, or how you need to be sitting back on your heels, or that it needs to be X amount of width. What I'm here to show you is that your squat stance is very individual and that there is not one perfect way to do it. Everyone's hip anatomy, ankle anatomy is a little bit different. We all have slightly different anthropometry, and so our squat stances are going to differ as well. Now, this is good for brand new beginners, just kind of working on bodyweight squat, or even if you've been squatting a while with a barbell, doing weighted back squats, and you're just struggling to hit depth or get as much out of it as you would like. Hopefully you'll find this useful. So we have basically, when we look at our stance width with our legs, we have basically two variables to play around with. We have our width, okay, narrow, moderate, wide, and then we have our degree of outturn. Are we straight ahead? Are we 10 or 15 degrees out? Or are we maybe more like 30 degrees, 30, 40 degrees out? So there are some restrictions. We're never really going to be more than hip width, more narrow than hip width. And you can see when I'm out here, this is maybe shoulder width and a half. We're pretty much never going to be wider than that unless we're doing a special sumo squat. So that's kind of our parameters between width. We can be right at hip width, pretty narrow, towards the most narrow end. And then we can be maybe shoulder width and a half towards the wide end here. Okay, then we're talking about our outturn. We're never going to be inward, okay, unless it's some sort of specific special exercise. We're either going to be straight ahead or probably about 30, maybe 40 degrees outward is going to be about our max degree of outturn. So within those two variables, we can be pretty narrow and straight. We could be narrow and pointed out. We could be moderate and straight, moderate with an outturn. Or we could be wide and straight, wide with some outturn. So what I encourage you to do is play around with those two variables and find the stance that allows you to hit squat depth most easily and feels the best on your knees. Executing the squat. So now you've spent a little time with your squat stance, perhaps you've done a few squats. Now we're going to actually execute the squat. So for me, my stance is pretty moderate width, actually fairly narrow, and a fair amount of toe out turn. Okay, this is what works best for my hips. So for the bodyweight squat, we're going to reach our arms out straight in front of us, fingers pointed forward, thumbs pointed up. I'm going to slightly screw my feet into the ground, rotating my kneecaps outward, just getting a little external rotation out of the hips right from the get-go, keeping my chest out and my weight on my midfoot, not on the heels, balance between toes and heels, feeling full foot contact. I'm going to think about lowering my hips straight down, and I'm going to squat as deeply as possible while keeping my back mostly straight. Not perfectly straight, mostly straight. Now, are my hips going to be sitting back slightly? Yes, but I want you to imagine your hips sitting straight down, and do let your knees drive forward in space as long as your heels stay down. So it'll look something like this. From the front view, it's my squat stance. My arms are straight ahead. Full surface of the feet in contact with the ground. Lowering my body down as deep as I can while keeping a nice straight back and without pain, and coming up. Common faults with the squat. Number one, heels coming off the ground. Okay, keep those heels down. Lifting your heels is not going to kill your knees, but we're not practicing a reliable pattern that we're going to be able to overload with weight. Problem number two, the opposite of that problem is sitting too far back on your heels, thus being away from your center of gravity and sitting your hips too far back. That looks something like this. All my weight's on my heels, I can wiggle my toes, I'm sitting my butt way back, I'm off balance, And as you can see, that results in me leaning forward too much. Problem number 3 is going to be losing the tension through your mid-back and just rounding your back. That would look something like this. Problem number 4 is going to be improper alignment of the knees, okay? Wherever my squat stance is, we talked about that in part 1 here, I just want my knees going in the same general direction of my toes. So if my feet are straight ahead, that's pretty simple. My knees are going straight ahead. However, if I'm a little wider and my toes are angled out, then I want to be really deliberate with driving my knees outward so that they are going in the same direction that my toes are pointed. If you want to be a little more specific, you could think in line with your second or third toe. For the most part, it's hard to overdo knees out, and knees inward is generally not a good idea. So if in doubt, work on knees out a little bit more.